Alright guys, here we are back for video 3. Now one thing I was thinking of was kind of a way to spice it up, make the videos a little bit more fun. So one of the things I think we're going to start doing is I'm going to start off with either a quote, a joke, or a riddle. And being kind of a boring, lame guy, I just went, I'll ask my phone and see what it comes up with. So here is the joke that my phone came up with to kind of lighten the mood to start things off is, why are fish easy to weigh? Because they have their own scales. So I'll give you a moment to finish laughing and kind of take that all in. But anyways, today we're going to start with Section 3, the American Revolution. And this is going to be kind of those final stepping stones before the colonists realize that they are going to want to revolt, that they are going to want to start their own country at this point. So the first topic today is going to be the French and Indian War. And this is what we call it here in the United States. But overseas, it's going to be known as the 7 Years' War. And, looking at the name, you can probably guess it. They named it 7-Year War because it lasted 9 years, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Most of the fighting took place in 7 years, but technically everything kind of took place within this 9-year time period. So it's going to be known as the 7-Year War in Europe, the French and Indian War here in the United States. And this kind of starts in the early 1740s. The reason it starts in the 1740s is you have both countries of Great Britain and France, they are competing for power. Now, early on, the first video we watched, we talked about the Spanish, how they were the first to kind of, maybe not necessarily colonize the region, but start to have it and take control there. Now we have the British and the French. They are openly fighting. They are openly interested in the Ohio River Valley, and both claim that it is supposed to be their land. So to kind of wrap it up, and we're really not going to talk in too much detail about the war, just kind of the outcome of it. Great Britain, they are going to win the war. And after the war, they're going to sign what they call the Treaty of Paris 1763. Pretty much what this means. The British, they are now the dominant power of North America. And again, we don't really talk too much about the battles and like the significant people that were involved in the war. The big thing that took place in this is going to be some of the negative relations. The British and the French, they were already at war. They were already disagreeing with each other, so that really didn't do much. But what this does towards the relations of people living in the United States, both the colonists and the Native Americans, this is kind of where they start to clash. And again, it's called the French and Indian War. These are going to be the two groups that the colonists are going to be fighting over here within the United States. So afterwards, some of those relationships, and again, we talked about it before, how the Native Americans, it was very important, very influential to pretty much make us survive within the first couple of winters or first couple of years. Now they're going to kind of be at odds here. So that's going to be the first impact. The second impact, just like every war today, one of the biggest factors of a war is how much money are you going to be able to spend. Now today, if you look at our budget, talking current 2018 in our budget, we spend the most on military. And that's going to be our biggest expense. Same thing is going to be true for the British. They are going to spend a lot of money on war. And realistically, they don't have enough money to pay for the entire war. So because of that reason, they have to figure out, well, what can we do to raise money? The easiest, the simplest way that a government can raise money, raise taxes. But most politicians aren't going to walk around and say, oh yeah, I'm going to raise taxes. This is what I'm going to do for the country. This is what I'm going to do for my people or my constituents living within my area. No, they're always going to say they want to lower it because that makes them look better. So the unpopular regulations, they're going to start around this time period. And most of it's going to have to do with taxing. The King George III at the time doesn't really want to put all that burden on the people who are living in England. They kind of see the colonies or America as a area where they can get a ton of those money and that resource. So regardless, they're going to kind of put some of those on the United States. So the first of the unpopular regulations, and there's going to be a lot of them we're going to talk about here, but the first one is the Proclamation Act of 1763. What this does, this is going to halt colonial expansion into Native American land west of the Appalachian Mountains. So if you're kind of picturing the United States, when we think about the colonies, you think about that eastern seaboard, as soon as they hit the Appalachian Mountains, they're supposed to be cut off. And this was done for a couple of reasons. One of them was for money and monetary reasons. The second one, though, they did not want to have another conflict with the Native Americans. Just like with the French and Indian War, that's who the fighting was going to be against. The British, the colonists, kind of everybody combined did not want to have another war. Therefore, by not allowing the colonists to expand, they're going to prevent it that way. However, as you can probably imagine, they're fighting over the Ohio River Valley. They're probably going to be upset that they fought over this land in this region, and now they can't go and move into it. People definitely are going to start to become upset with that. So that's going to be the first of the unpopular regulations. The next one, the Sugar Act of 1764. And as the name implies, most of this new tax is going to be on sugar. And taxing at this point was a little bit different. Today when we go to the store, we see a shirt is $10.99. Most of us know that when we actually go up to the cash register, it's not going to be that $10.99. We have to pay that direct tax. This is not going to be that direct tax that's going to take place at this time period. The Sugar Act, what it does, it raises taxes on imports. So if raw sugar and molasses is going to be brought in from the United States, that tariff, or remember I used that example before, that fancy way of saying tax, that is going to start to be increased. But once a business is told that they have to raise the money that they have to spend on the tariffs, everyone else is going to start to have to pay that premium there. So it's not a direct tax, but raw sugar and molasses, they are going to have to start paying more money for that. The same thing for silk, wine, coffee, and indigo. And the big thing about this raw sugar and molasses, it's used in most of their drinks. Raw sugar was going to be mixed in tea. At this time period, they would not really drink a lot of water because a lot of people got sick. So molasses was going to be turned into rum. So kind of the two biggest beverages at this time period, the price now starts to go up. And the colonists, they're pretty upset about this. So they start to smuggle things in. They start to sneak all these goods into the country. And, of course, as we know, the British, they're going to be upset about it. And eventually they are going to repeal the Sugar Act because they're losing money. Because people now see this, supply and demand, people want more sugar, they want to pay a lower price, people are going to become involved in that illegal trade at this point. Then the last one on this slide of the unpopular regulations is going to be the Quartering Act of 1765. So once we start to have this unrest, people are starting to get uneasy with the government, the British, they send more redcoats overseas. But with that comes another issue. They're sending all these soldiers overseas to go and make sure that the colonies are not going to revolt, that they're not going to become upset, but they don't have a place to live. So the Quartering Act, the way it simply states, if a redcoat, if somebody who is a British soldier wants to come and live in your house, you have to let them. You have to provide shelter. You have to provide food. You have to clean their laundry, clean their clothes. Now, today, is that legal? Absolutely not. We have the Third Amendment that is going to be guaranteeing that is not going to take place. But the British King George, he's calling the shots at this point. He needs a place to put his soldiers to make sure he keeps that tax money, he keeps all that coming in. They're going to be forced to pay and make sure soldiers can live there. Now, as we start to continue, the next one, which is probably going to be the biggest and kind of one of the ones that makes people the most upset right away, is going to be the Stamp Act. Now, the Stamp Act of 1765, this puts a stamp on every single printed material. Not like today. If we think of a stamp, we mostly just think as something that we're going to mail. If we're going to send a package, you got to put a stamp on it. You got to go to the post office. You got to pay that postage to get that sent over there. But a stamp is going to go on any printed material at this time period. That's going to include, as I already mentioned, if you're trying to mail something. If you're buying something with the newspaper, you have to pay a stamp. If you're buying playing cards. So any time that you have to buy something that's printed, you now have to pay extra money. And as it says in bold there, this is going to be a test question, so make sure to remember this. This is the first direct tax. We have a hard time, again, understanding why people are going to be so upset about this. We pay direct taxes today. We really don't fight it too much. Yes, a lot of people will complain that I don't want to pay income tax and state tax and those types of things. But, we have almost been accustomed to it. One of their biggest fights was they're going to have this big quote called "No taxation without representation." King George didn't ask if this was okay. He didn't go to Parliament. He said, we need money. We are going to get it from the colonists. And that is kind of that almost first stepping stone where now the colonists, they're starting to group together and they're starting to rebel a little bit more. So the Sons of Liberty, they're going to organize protests and they're going to try to intimidate stamp distributors. And this is going to be one thing. They're able to go and kind of seize ships. They're able to overlook them. But these stamp collectors, this is not a job you want because they are being locked in ships. They are being stored in areas that you wouldn't want to be stored in to make sure that they are going to be not getting that money there. So that's going to be more of a, I don't know if you want to call it violent, but not really that peaceful form of protest. In October 1765, that's when things start to become a little bit more peaceful because we have a representative from 9 different colonies create the Stamp Act Congress. And they're going to issue what they call a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. So Declaration of Rights, we already I'm guessing most of us know what that means. It's what we think is going to be a right that we have here in the United States. And think about the Declaration of Independence. I know I'm skipping to it, but we have the right of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So it's going to be almost kind of that stepping stone there. The grievances, that's a formal complaint. So he's issuing this declaration saying that we have these rights, we have these complaints, we would like them fixed, or there could possibly be consequences. Because at this time, we're almost getting to the idea of having a revolution, and almost things starting to change in that fashion there. But most people, I think, okay, let's just tell the king we're upset. Let's try to make that change there. And then the last one on here, the Stamp Act, once it finally took effect, the colonists boycotted it so much, it actually made the British lose money. They actually had to pay more for the stamps than if they would have just put a direct tax on it. So because of that, it's going to be repealed. Now, as we start to go to more of these different attacks and some of these different laws and unpopular regulations, the next one's going to be known as the Townshend Acts. And what this does, it puts new custom duties on glass, lead, paper, paint, and tea that's going to be imported into the colonies. So we already talked about paper. They tried that. Ultimately, they failed. The next one, they're going to put tax on tea. People, again, they're going to be told who to buy it from, where to buy it from. And that's going to be the British East India Trading Company, because they are kind of they have a good relationship with the king. This company, what I'm talking about, the company has a good relationship, but they're going bankrupt. So the king wants to help them out. One of the easiest ways to help them out, make sure that the colonists are forced to pay money, make sure that the colonists are forced to buy it from them. Now, custom officers, they start to get more power. So the King George, again, and I keep bringing it up because it's so important to remember that he's the one kind of calling the shots right now. They are going to start to give more power to these officers. So the officers used to be able to go and, maybe not arrest people, but go and search and make people pay a fine. They can now arrest smugglers. They don't have to have this warrant. They don't have to have probable cause. They can go anywhere they want to, make sure people are going to be arrested. And as you can probably imagine, those custom officers, they are going to start to take advantage of that. And they're going to become a little bit too powerful, and a lot of fighting is going to take place because of it. And kind of all this finally comes to a tipping point on March 5th, 1770, when there is going to be what we call the Boston Massacre. Now, a crowd of colonists, they begin taunting a British soldier. And it's a tough time period, kind of talking about it. They're in Boston, it's snowing. They're told to stand outside the custom house and make sure that they keep guard. But while this is happening, there are people, there are colonists that are throwing snowballs, they're throwing rocks, they're throwing anything they can get their hands on. And the soldiers are told, do not retaliate. Again, it's got to be tough to be in that situation and know you're getting hit, know you're hated, you're getting yelled at, but there's not really much you can do. But the redcoats, they fire on the crowd, then they kill 5 people. Just like today, the media, it's very important, it's very influential. The media is going to put that blame, put that negativity on the redcoats. So because of that, England, they repeal almost all the Townshend Acts. So no more paying on glass, lead, paper, paint, and those types of things. However, they are going to leave the tea tax, which in a way it's kind of like a half one. They pay less taxes, but the biggest issue with the Townshend Act was paying that tax on tea. Now, unfortunately, they're told they have to continue to pay that tax. And to wrap up the third video here, we're going to talk about kind of this final event. Maybe not where we're at the point where it's no turning back now, but it's going to be a big event that happened throughout American history. I'm guessing most of you have heard this one before, the Boston Tea Party. So the colonists, again, they've been defying the British for quite some time now. And the first thing to talk about today, and I talked about it before in the video, the custom house officers and kind of the issue and the relationship that they have with the colonists. Again, the British, they're forcing tea come from the British East India Company. So because of that reason, they're going to be upset because the price is going to start to go up. Now the British, those custom officers, as I said, become a little bit too powerful. Because they're too powerful, now they're illegally searching ships. So before, again, they had to have kind of that probable cause. They had to have a reason why they're going onto these ships. But now they're illegally searching them. They're illegally taking contraband. And again, contraband probably isn't what you think of today of like illegal things coming into the country. Contraband could be tea. It could be without having to pay a tax or a tariff at that point. But they start to search these ships in Rhode Island, and the colonists becoming upset, they burn down the gas fleet. So now, again, it's going to be a British ship. These custom officers are doing illegal searches. They're going to burn it down as a form of protest. And because all this is going on all throughout the United States, and this is the first time I'm bringing up and talking about Rhode Island, all these different groups are coming up with their own plan, but nothing is really going to be coordinated. So the committees of correspondence, they meet, and they're created for one reason, and that's to communicate within the colonies and coordinate one specific strategy. because we are almost at that point where it's inevitable that we are going to be at war here. But nonetheless, if you have all these different states doing different things and protesting in different fashions, it's going to be tough to kind of coordinate that there. So the committees of correspondence, they are going to come up with this idea of communicating and having their own strategy. And then kind of that last stepping stone before we get to the Boston Tea Party is the Tea Act. And I used this company before, the British East India Company. They are going into debt. They are just about at the point of bankruptcy, and the king wants to help them out. So, saying first off that we have to pay a tax on tea, they're going to be upset. Now, again, they're telling us who to exactly buy it from, and any other tea is going to be illegal to own or possess at that time. The colonists definitely are going to start to fight this more. So this leads to the Boston Tea Party, and I really don't have a lot of information on here about what the Boston Tea Party is, because most of you have probably heard about it before. But here you have a group of colonists. They sneak on at night. They go to the Boston Harbor, and they take all the tea and pour that into the harbor. And this is done as a sign of protest. They're upset that they have to pay for it. They're upset that they have to pay a higher price. So by taking it and dumping it into the harbor, they are destroying, in a way, government property. And at this point, the colonists defying the British definitely are going to put down some harsh punishments here, which is where our next video is going to begin.